Welcome to another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm your host, Gazette Hawkeyes reporter John Steppe. Excited to welcome back to the podcast Andy Greder from the Pioneer Press. Andy, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, good to be back, John. It's nice to have this become a bit of a tradition for us.
Yes. And the tradition of Floyd of Rosedale has had a different home the last year. First of all,
Mhm.
okay, where is Floyd? Or where has Floyd been, I should say, in October, whatever that day was at camp?
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously it was the first time that the Gophers have had it in 8 years. So it was a very coveted piece of hardware. And PJ Fleck said that he brought it to his house right away after they won it. So the first night back in Minnesota, it stayed in PJ Fleck's house. So I know that turned a lot of heads south of the border, but it also has turned heads to Minnesota's east when PJ Fleck has done something very similar to that when the Gophers have won Paul Bunyan's axe against Wisconsin. So first night it goes with the head coach and has been in his bedroom. He says it hasn't been in his bed, but it's been in his bedroom, and I know that's kind of gets a lot of people's attention. But it's currently in the trophy case in the Gophers, football facility. It makes a lot of rounds, just like the axe does. PJ wants to share it with everyone, so it goes to Rotary clubs and different speaking engagements. It was at the Minnesota State Fair here a couple of weeks ago. So PJ likes to share it with his wife, and he also likes to share it with everyone else in Minnesota as well.
I guess it'd be a little harder to have a 98-pound bronze pig in bed versus just the axe. The axe feels a little lighter weight
Yeah,
there.
for sure. You probably don't need as much help hoisting it up onto the mattress if that were the case. But yeah, he's a peculiar coach at times. He does things his own way, and bringing rivalry trophies home at least the first time they win it under his tenure has been a little bit of a tradition for him.
And then with this Minnesota team, having the loss to North Carolina, then the two blowout games against not the greatest foes,
Right.
kind of what have you kind of taken away from what this Gophers team is or what it might be, I guess we should say, at this point in the year?
Yeah, like you mentioned, it's hard to kind of really pinpoint who this Gopher team is because Rhode Island is kind of a middling FCS school, and Nevada's picked to finish last in the Mountain West. So when you put together consecutive shutouts against those teams, it looks good on paper, but you don't really know how much card stock is in that paper just because of those opponents. I think the Gophers defense under Corey Heatherman, who's their new defensive coordinator, is very multiple. Corey Heatherman's very aggressive. He's certainly going to be blitzing come Saturday night at Huntington Bank Stadium. So that's kind of a staple that they've had in these first three games. They have 9 takeaways. They have, I think, 7 interceptions. So they've been very opportunistic. That's been something that's really helped them post their first consecutive shutouts in 62 years since 1962. So to shut out anybody, I think in modern day college football is impressive, and having those amount of turnovers has certainly helped the defense. On the offensive side, the Gophers under Mo Ibrahim or with Mo Ibrahim would run the ball, with him 35 times and as a team up to 40 times in a game. And they were running the ball 65, 70% of overall snaps. That's much more balanced now with Max Brosmer as the quarterback, the transfer from New Hampshire. They're passing the ball about 55% of the time. There's a lot of quick passing game, a lot of short, intermediate, and checkdowns. They like his ability to process at the line of scrimmage. He's a sixth-year senior who is pre-med, who loves to play chess, and his ability to kind of dissect the line of scrimmage is something that they have shifted their offense to build around and to work with. He hasn't thrown the ball much downfield, but he has completed it. I think almost 70% of his passes through 3 games. But like I said, with a grain of salt against who they've played. So a little bit of shifting on both sides of the ball for Gophers through 3 games.
With this kind of chess match here between Minnesota and Iowa, pun intended there.
Yeah.
With that, Iowa's defense, their biggest shortcoming probably has been the big plays given up. Do
Right.
you see
Yeah.
that as something that Minnesota might try to exploit, or maybe they stay a little more to what their bread and butter has been with Brosmer this year.
Yeah, I asked offensive coordinator Greg Harbaugh about that very thing yesterday, just given the fact that Iowa's given up, I think, 3 yards or three passing plays over 70 yards or 60 yards here this year. So they have been exploited at certain times. And I asked him about that, and he said, yeah, they always kind of want to take, somewhere between 4 and 6 shots in a game. They haven't had a whole lot of success in passes over 20 yards. I think Brosmer is something like 2 for 7 over 20 yards with a touchdown and a pick. So his completion percentage has really dropped and has had some success. And like I said, an interception doing that. They have incorporated a little bit of a screen game to Daniel Jackson that went for one of their explosive plays against Nevada. So even throwing short and trying to get explosive plays that way is something that Greg Harbaugh is going to be looking to do. But I think, when you play a stout Hawkeye defense, being able to at least have the threat of stretching the field keeps them more honest. If you play into their hand and keep it short and intermediate, then they're able to get downhill much faster and more relentlessly, and kind of plays into their hands. So I think taking shots and the Hawkeye susceptibility to them, I think will be a main focus as we go into Saturday.
With this run game with Darius Taylor, it seems
Yeah.
like he's kind of the guy after missing that first game.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. He was their number one last year. He was leading the Big Ten in rushing, I think, by the end of September last year, but dealt with hamstring issues and missed the second half of the year before coming back and playing well in the bowl game. He missed the North Carolina game with an injury. They certainly missed him in that one. They've had trouble running the ball here this year, which I know the Hawkeyes have been great stopping the run like they typically are. Before Darius Taylor had an 80-yard run against Nevada, through 10 quarters, they were rushing the ball for, I think, 2.7 yards per carry. So it was difficult for them against Rhode Island. It was difficult for them against North Carolina. And for the first half against Nevada, they were also struggling. So are they able to have success on the ground against, one of the best rush defenses in the country is going to be a really telling thing. PJ talked about kind of the body blows that they felt like they were able to levy against Nevada, and then they kind of broke free with a knockout punch of an 80-yard run and kind of were able to open things up even more after that. So it's another one of the themes going into the game is how committed are the Gophers going to be to running the ball. That's usually what PJ Fleck does a lot of, but are they going to be willing to take what Iowa gives them in the short and intermediate passing game with Brosmer as well?
With this offensive line, is this kind of at the caliber that maybe some of these past Minnesota offensive lines have been at?
Yeah, I think, they've got 80% of their linemen back. 4 of the 5 spots are back. They've had some trouble on the right side. Martez Lewis has been either playing guard or center, and he's since gotten benched, and Ashton Beers has come in and played either guard or tackle, on the right side. But the 4 other guys have been regulars. So that's why it's a little bit perplexing, because it's been something that the Gophers have been able to do throughout PJ Fleck's tenure, and they have their number 1 running back and 4 of their 5 offensive linemen, multiple tight ends back that are good, run blockers as well. So it's been probably the biggest surprise here through 3 games is the Gophers' overall kind of ability to run the ball consistently.
And then on the defensive side, Tyler Nubin seemed to be probably one of the more underrated defensive backs in the Big Ten. I was kind of surprised they didn't get more postseason kind of honors with that.
Sure.
You were mentioning the changes defensively. Have they kind of missed a beat at all with the secondary without having somebody of that talent, or obviously still a lot of other talented guys there?
Yeah, for sure. I think, when you lose a second team All-American type who was drafted in the second round by the New York Giants, obviously you're going to, miss that type of player, especially given the fact that I think he had, a Gopher career high 13 interceptions and really was a ball hawk in the back of the Gopher secondary. So they certainly have missed his kind of leadership. But like I said at the top, that they have 7 interceptions and a number of safeties have been able to contribute there. Kerry Brown had 2 picks against Nevada and was the Big Ten Freshman of the Week for his performance. So they've kind of rotated in the back end and have been able to get it done so far this year. I think going into Saturday, Justin Wally, their number 1 cornerback, he suffered a knee injury against Nevada. and, didn't play beyond, I think it was early in the first half. So his status for Saturday is up in the air, and that's something to watch because he's really their number one cover guy. And with him potentially being out, they're going to have to turn to a redshirt freshman in Zaquan Bryan at that spot, and it could be something to be concerned about if you're a Gopher fan, and something to exploit if you're a Hawkeye fan.
With kind of perfect segue to my next question with injuries, Iowa has seemingly been unusually healthy. I'm sure plenty of Hawkeye fans are knocking on wood right now as I say that.
Sure.
Kind of where is Minnesota from a health standpoint? Any other injuries that could be a factor on Saturday?
No, that's pretty much the main one for the Gophers. They've been able to stay, mostly healthy. Obviously, Darius Taylor came back from the injury in the opener, but for the most part, they're pretty healthy. PJ Fleck says next to nothing when it comes to injuries. So if we don't get it on the injury report within 2 hours, good luck to us being able to kind of report or have anything being willingly shared by the head coach.
And then Kirk Ferentz mentioned special teams for Minnesota,
Yeah,
in his opening remarks, unprompted. You don't
it
hear
sounds
that
like
about
Kirk
every
Ferentz to
opponent
me.
necessarily. It seems like
Yeah.
that's been an area, at least with kicking, maybe not so great this year, but
Yeah.
historically, seems like Minnesota's had probably one of their better kickers.
Yeah, I mean, he was the Big Ten kicker of the year last year, Dragan Kesich. I think he made 25 of 29 or something like that last year. He's got a big leg. He can hit from, mid 50s, maybe even 60 if the conditions are right. But yeah, he missed 2 out of 3 against North Carolina, including one that would have won the game for them on the last second. So I think he's 5 for 9 this year. So he's missed, as many as he missed all of last season. So that's something to keep an eye on. But he has I think he's got 4 or 5 that are beyond 50. So of those misses, a lot of them are from distance. The Gophers punt return game has been pretty much non-existent for a long time under PJ Fleck. And their number one returner is out for the year now, and they're turning to Coy Parrish, who's a 4-star recruit from northern Minnesota, who Ohio State wanted to sign at the end of the last recruiting cycle, and he decided to come to Minnesota, and now he's the number one kick returner. He had a 28-yard return against Rhode Island. He nearly broke a couple last week against Nevada. Obviously, Iowa fans know that they gave up a punt return touchdown last week, so that's something to keep an eye on as well. They've got a very electric freshman who's quite a playmaker. He's coming into his own in his first couple of games, and he could be a name that when it comes to punt returns and comes to the punting game, obviously was a talking point in last year's rivalry game, and might be with a return on the other side coming on Saturday.
There was a question to Kirk Ferentz this week about the invalid fair catch. Has that come up much in interviews in Minneapolis?
Yeah, for sure. It's been a theme, here this week. It was a theme, kind of earlier on in the year as well. I think there's a gold out at the game on Saturday, and Gopher fans with their NIL collective has put together a shirt about the invalid fair catch signal, and on the back of the shirt it's kind of a verbatim section of the rule book outlining exactly what an invalid fair catch signal is. So while Iowa fans have their fair catch shirts, Gopher fans, their collective have them as well. PJ Fleck really tries to snuff out any talk about it being controversial because he really relies on how the Big Ten interpreted the rule and how it benefited him as a result of it. So he tries to kind of steer it into well, there was nothing controversial about it, but it was without a doubt contentious, as everybody on both sides of the rivalry know.
Do you have a score prediction yet?
You know what? I think I said something like 17-14, 19-17 for the Gophers. I think they're able to win 2 in a row for the first time since 2010, 2011. I see both these teams very evenly matched. I think defenses on both sides, I think, are better. And I think the spread in this game, or what the over-under is, I think it's probably going to come just under that. And we're used to that as well. I think, what was last year, like 12-10. So
Yeah.
it's been that way for a while now, and I think just given the familiarity with both sides, that it'll be another low-scoring affair.
Yeah, I think it was 2 point game last year, 3 point game the year before, and a 5 point game back in 2021. So it seems
Yeah.
like it's been the trend. My score prediction right now is 21-17 Iowa, but
Yeah.
this is a game that, as you said, can really go down to the wire. And I don't think it's a gimme by any means for Iowa, and certainly much more of a test for both teams than what they've been facing lately.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you look at them, they both have played teams kind of very similarly, right? They both have had a power forward type of opponent. Obviously, Iowa with the rivalry game, Minnesota with North Carolina, an FCS school, and kind of a mid-major type school as well. So yeah, it's, they're both kind of they're very similar in a lot of respects, right? I think that's what's very intriguing about this one is they're kind of coming into it with a lot of with the same kind of bullet points.
Well, Andy, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And thanks to our listeners. Until next time, we will talk Hawks later.